I feel like the way we organize society has kind of just been destroying itself in a way. Like, I don't know why everything has to be like this constant competition to make money and be amazing and okay, obviously you should like strive to do like good things in the world, blah blah blah, but it's like a lot of our values are kind of just not actually aligned with what we believe personally. Like we're more striving for something that has been, or a set of values would have been taught to us more than something that we genuinely feel is important. So I feel like there's kind of a lot of cognitive dissonance right now in general, just because like we're all kind of striving for things that we've been told that we should want more so than trying to explore like our own depths of feeling and desire and interest and authentically lay these out in the world. Basically what I'm saying is the social contract itself has become kind of toxic to figuring out the best way that society actually could be, because we're all just kind of focused on meeting the demands of you know this very abstract concept of like social hierarchy and just like all these values which have been taught to us from like the beginning of our life cycles and like instilled in us as things we're taught to believe rather than like being, I guess, like asked what we believe. Because I mean that's just, it's just like rather than creating society, we're kind of being susceptible to it. And I mean, like, the unfortunate reality is just like everyone has to work these very mundane jobs in this corporate structure, and you have to follow along with the procedures that they want you to follow along with because that's apparently what makes money. But I don't know if I even believe that personally. To me, it seems to be more about like putting people under wraps and making sure that they follow along with this very rigid order than actually trying to get people to be organized and productive. Though that's allegedly the goal, but I don't really believe that's what the goal is anymore. I guess my point is I don't see a reason to uphold society if it's not actually serving and working with our own interests, right? And maybe a lot of people don't totally understand why I'm even, or like what motivates this kind of talk. Like, society just works and we do things and it's great and everyone agrees to it. But no, that's not actually how it is for a lot of people. A lot of people don't really enjoy or want to participate in this, and it's just kind of something that they're going along with. And I think going into the future, especially with like the newer generations who are exposed to the internet, who are exposed to all this communication, we're going to be a lot more cognizant of this fact that, we're mostly just following along with our conditioning more than anything. But the internet is kind of just like making the world smaller and smaller. It's making it so that everyone is kind of developing this intrinsic understanding of their own place, and as well as the way that society as a whole exhibits influence over that place at a social level, not just like this broader economic and legal system. I mean, this is basically just the natural result of the influence of social media in our lives, and we're slowly starting to discover like what this whole world actually means, which is not something we've really had an opportunity to in the past. We've kind of just been, bound to following along with like whatever our friends or our family have always been telling us to do, because that's all we really knew. But that's completely changed now. We're basically entering this phase where the next generation is going to be a lot, or the generation that's actually starting to become more notable in society is basically being raised by the internet, more or less. I mean, a lot of the history of society is like the history of the atomization of a particular group of people, stratified from everything else that exists. And this could be either the society itself, or it could be, the neighborhood you live in, your family. All of these groups are basically segmented into a particular niche or a particular, like any group, which basically says, okay, you're a part of us, you're going to do the things that we dictate, and that just becomes your life. But again, the internet is changing that. We're beginning to be a lot less atomized, and even where we are limited to this particular space or group of people, those are all becoming more interconnected, where it can all kind of start to feel like one big thing rather than a specific coalition or whatever. Kind of like a secondary result of this is actually antagonistic to what I just said, and that's that we're creating new kinds of like social groups within the the unlimited frameworks we have of the internet, and that is certain social groups are developing antagonisms, or are developing a kind of like almost a cult-like mentality where they don't want to associate with people who are different than them, and they may even kind of actively hate the idea of that. Like, you basically see that in the most oversimplified way with like liberals and conservatives, and how they're becoming more and more opposed to each other. And so we're also kind of learning to create our own like micro societies within society. And this can be different communities of people who share a particular interest, or they're fans of someone, they all get together, and they're Twitch streamers, whatever, etc. But basically having these micro societies online is going to now translate into affecting the way we view the real world, and we're going to start to view ourselves more as creators than participants in something that we're being coerced into. And this is extremely important. This is like basically the entire crux of the, if you have any familiar with astrological terms, Aquarian age. It has to do with the intermixing of the whole of society to create a new picture that's based upon everything that comes together to define what we know as humanity. And this is an extremely important phase, especially if like we actually make it to a point where as a society, like everyone's being provided internet access, freedom from poverty. We should, obviously that's our goal. We want to reach that point. So if we do, we're going to have to start thinking then like, what is this? Who are we? What are we doing? Blah, blah, blah. And this essentially is like the good side of postmodernism. This is like where we can reach a point that instead of basically just fending for survival and deprioritizing creativity and things like that, we're actually taking an active role in deciding like how are we going to, as a species, define the entire rest of our history. This is so freaking important that we do, and not just like fall into these traps where we think society is horrible and people are entitled, and you don't even know what's going on with your neighbor or other countries or anything. It's like moving beyond that. We can be like, oh, we actually get to define everything. We're the ones doing this. It's not like we're prisoners or anything. And all these institutions that exist are secondary to what we actually want. And it's unfortunate we're still very much bound to the institutions as they exist. But I think the future of society is basically going to be detaching ourselves from that to meaningfully create our own vision. So personally, the way I see this moving forward is I just want to see like a lot more creativity from society. I want to see a lot more people like authentically engaging with their environment. Like to change the world, we don't necessarily have to freaking overthrow the government and just, you know, freaking. It doesn't have to be this whole thing. It doesn't have to be all chaotic. It doesn't have to be so intensely radical that, you lose your own ability to like just exist as a freaking human in the world. Like I think what a lot of people forget when they're trying to change the world is this can be a gradual process. This doesn't have to be something that happens all at once. And society isn't, and the institutions that exist aren't totally like just like primed against us. It's like we actually do kind of have a foot in the door somewhat in our own ability to change things and influence the world. And if you think about it, it really couldn't be any other way because what are we? We are the bulk of society. We are a massive group of people, and our interests are meant to be represented by the society. So, unless we're literally living under a dictatorship, it's never going to be at this point where our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs do not actually change and over time reformat the way society represents itself. Basically, what I'm saying is this is the point in history where we get to actually do cool. But the only way we're going to get to do that is if we do two things, and that's one, stop being so ridiculously competitive with each other to the point of destruction, and two, start leveraging our own power as participants in society rather than subjects to its will. And this is basically at the core of anarchist philosophy, which is you still have a system, you still have government, but like we're the ones who are effectively running it. We're the ones who actually are giving it power to do what we personally want. And it's not even easy work trying to figure out what you want and what your values are. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that you kind of have to do self-actualization work. It's not necessarily something that just always comes naturally to you. You really have to explore like what you believe, what you want, who you are, and being able to do all those things is not something that is always going to come easy to you or anyone. I mean, it's kind of assumed that it is, that you're just born and you have principles and you exist and there are all these things, but you really do have to actually take time to figure it out for yourself. And this is why like there's this common trope of like the teenager rebelling against their parents and then going on to do the opposite of everything they want them to do. Because once you reach that age where you can actually start defining what you want out of life rather than having it given to you and defined for you, then you start to feel a little bit rebellious because you want to impose or you want to create values which are different from the already existing ones, the traditional ones. So basically, humanity itself right now is like a teenager. We're just now starting to get a taste of moving beyond simply existing in the world and towards effectively becoming the gods of our own reality. And I don't really mean this in any like grandiose way. It's not even really about like power or like our ability to use technology to influence our environment. No, it's more about like the way that we, as I've been saying throughout this video, basically create the meaning in our lives. This has basically been the goal of humanity since we started out, has been to transcend scarcity and get to a place where we can manifest our own will in whatever way that represents itself. And basically, so now we want to get to this point where we move beyond things like war as well, and the rest of human history would just be at that point be like some kind of well, it'd be much more positive. Basically, it'd be more about like good things that happen, I guess, than bad things. I mean, looking at history, it's pretty much all bad things, sadly. The only exception to that basically being technology. It's actually extremely hard to imagine like even what that would be like, because it's almost like we don't even have the faculties in our minds yet to actually have an appreciation for the utopian state that we could potentially create. And it's not likely we're going to just transcend like the concept of countries, for instance, anytime soon. Like it's going to be something that is more gradual, I guess. But I think with the concept of the internet, I think we're going to eventually get something like a universal language, and that will be like the key point that's going to start uniting us behind this new way of approaching civilization as a whole. But also, if you think about it, this is really the only way that I think humanity can meaningfully move forward. We can't always be in this state of always like, you know, competing powers, conflicting interests, blah blah blah. We want to get to this post scarcity state, and we can, and we should. It should be our number one priority is doing that. And a huge part of that also has to be just changing our own mindsets. Unfortunately, changing our mindsets is not such an easy thing. We'd like to think we could just wake up one day and choose peace as a global society, but that's not really possible no matter what we do. It's something ingrained almost in our DNA. But basically, our mindset going forward has to be that we are actively trying to transcend all of the ways in which humanity has been working against itself rather than cooperatively. Because if you think about it, if we had been working cooperatively this entire time instead of, just all these global superpowers competing for resources and land, etc., we'd pretty much be living in the most optimal world possible by now. I mean, it's kind of ironic to me that the internet was created as kind of like a military technology, and now it's just this global system that will hopefully bring us together. So all these global superpowers as they exist, China, Russia, USA, they need to stop with the bull. They need to take some time and just talk things over and actually, become partners in trade and not have this competition going to see who's going to win. I mean, nobody wants this. Nobody wants to be a part of that. It's just not something that we should be engaging with on a meaningful level, and the populace at large is just not going to go along with it, I don't think, because there's no meaningful reason for it. It's just what humanity is used to. We're not operating on a scarcity based level anymore. We're leagues beyond that, and we could be living so much more meaningfully than we are right now. But we're actually, it's like at an interpersonal level, we are even limited by these kind of global competitive forces. Because who wants to build a society in the future just to have it, torn down by some kind of catastrophic war? That sounds horrible. That sounds like something that would lead to mass nihilism. I think, as a first world country, what we need to prioritize, since we're, kind of beyond the point of really having to worry about food, well, most of us at least, but since we are at that point, we should be worrying about how do we actually leverage cooperation rather than always having to focus on being self-serving as a means of survival. We need to learn to develop mutual interests, because in theory this is what capitalism is like even supposed to do in principle, is like It's supposed to make it so that all the systems of society work together using selfishness to guide a singular system. But this doesn't really incorporate into our mindsets very much. We're still guided by the same principles of selfishness, which, contribute to things like war. And I think this is actually just kind of antiquated. I think we can really get to a point where it feels like a direct extension of our own will to help society. And that would, in theory, then create like this cyclical kind of mutualism where everyone's just contributing to something and everyone benefits from that same thing. I mean, it's in theory the same principle, and that is the principle behind society, behind working together versus working against each other. But it sounds more like communism when I say it that way, and then when I say it the other way. But that kind of shows you, like, it really is having a lot to do with our own mindsets. It's not always about, like, having X system or X government policies, etc. It's also about this movement away from a mindset of scarcity and of competition to the mindset of realizing that we're actually free from all the things which have created strife in the past for humanity. And as technology continues to develop, as we have things like AI, as we have machines that can do everything that we're supposed to do, this is going to become even more pertinent, even more pressing, that we actually do things like develop our own meaning and learn to buy lamps. We need to learn to buy lamps on Amazon so that people can actually see us when we are talking.
Order of the day.